that unit was, it was an experience. You know, you get to see children. Children are extremely resilient, especially when you're talking about children who have been sexually abused. I think some of the hardest interviews I've ever watched are the forensic interviews with some of those children who were so incredibly resilient. I grew up a lot in that because those kids made me grow up, because I had to be able to sit there and listen to that story without my whole entire mindset on society changing, because I had just had my first child when I got there. That's what we do. You get over it and you keep moving on. But having worked there, having known what type of content I was exposed to, having known the psychological effects that it had on me, I was hyper aware of the people that worked for me and really wanted to know, how are you doing? I need to know these things because I need to know if you need time off. I need to know if you need some time away from the job. I need to know if you need to transfer out. You know, these cases you take home, these are the worst kind of cases to take home. I hope when I leave this career that I have left a legacy that allows other individuals to be able to do the same thing and come along in the ranks and just be able to accomplish whatever it is that they want, and understand that somebody cares about them accomplishing everything that they've ever set out to do, whether it's at this department or outside of this department. I hope that I've been that person for someone.
You're listening to the ATO Bridging the Divide podcast, brought to you by the Assist the Officer Foundation.
Since 1999, the ATO has given assistance to the first responder community, and now we want to give them a platform to hear their incredible stories.
We also want to hear the stories of the many people that support us.
Our community is small, but it is strong.
We have differences. We don't always agree, and we all make mistakes.
But together we can grow, we can heal.
And we can learn from those mistakes.
And together we can bridge the divide.
True leaders always practice the 3 R's. Respect for self, respect for others, responsibility for all their actions. Welcome back, ATO family. Today we're sitting with a truly incredible human being. And the Dallas Police Department has been lucky to have her since she graduated from the Academy Class 286. She is a Dallas native, went to Booker T. Washington and studied dance. Sam Houston State alum, graduating with a bachelor's in biology, pre-med, and dance in 2003. She interned with McKinney Medical Examiner and was accepted into the Dallas School of Mortuary Science. So how did Dallas PD get so lucky to get someone like this? She chose to serve the city. She walked away from one field and took a journey on the streets of Southwest Dallas. It led her to investigating some of the most horrific crimes: child exploitation, internet crimes against children, the true powerless victims in society. She promoted to sergeant and supervised units like public integrity, internal affairs, and now she is one of the leaders of Dallas PD's most high-profile units, Dallas Homicide. We are proud to welcome on Sergeant Jessica Criddle. Jessica, thank you for joining us. I'm kind of catering to the ATO fans. I've had several people ask to get you on.
Oh, wow.
And, yeah, several. And, oh, no, she's on the list. Now, finally, you're
here.
Yeah, you're here.
Yes.
Thank you.
Ta-da. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We also have the great Danny Canetti. He's sitting in as a guest co-host. He finally didn't have a warrant to run or some SWAT training to do. And,
Well, there's training going on right now. I'm supposed to be somewhere else.
Okay, all right. Well, nobody knows when we record this, so you're good.
Well, thanks for being here, Danny.
You ready to dive into this?
Let's go.
All right. I want to talk about growing up. I'm a Dallas native myself and grew up in the Oak Cliff area. What part of town did you grow up in?
The same, Oak Cliff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where at?
Yeah, it was right there near like the Camp Wisdom, Hampton area.
Yeah. Well, I was at Polk, and I went to Bertie Alexander.
That's where I went.
Oh, really?
I did.
An owl, right?
I did.
Yeah, the Bertie Alexander Owls?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they were, no, Apaches.
What?
Yeah.
Huh. Well, because I have a picture with me in like maybe it was some other spare school came in as a mascot, a big owl. But yeah,
it could have been the Owls.
Yeah, because I live off Kernwood over there, Kernwood and Polk.
I was right there at Kernwood and Indian Ridge. Wow. Yeah.
Wow.
Did you ever see each other at the bus?
Yeah.
The bus
Well,
stop,
I mean, I never really walked home because since I stayed right
And
around the corner.
no way she's the same age as Joe. I mean,
No, I'm much
look
older.
at what we're looking
Yeah,
at. Here.
yeah, I am much older.
Not by much, believe it or not.
No, we literally walked to school because Bertie Alexander was a block away.
Yeah,
from
it was a block away from
13,
me.
17 Kernwood.
Yeah.
But my brother went to Carter.
My sister did.
Wow. He graduated in 83.
My sister graduated in 93.
Okay.
Oh,
Wow.
there we go.
Yeah, slightly, a little
It's like
bit
the Spider-Man
over. Yeah.
meme in here. You guys are
It's
just pointing
crazy.
at each
Yeah,
other
we're
like, hey, I'm
7.
the same person
Yeah,
as
it's
you.
like that 7 degrees from Kevin Bacon. It's like we're all 7 degrees from Jessica Criddle.
Yeah,
So.
it is funny because I know so many people like that. Like I grew up around so many people that I didn't know. I've arrested people that I didn't know.
Yeah.
They was like, I remember you from school, and I'm like,
Oh,
I knew you were going to be a criminal.
Yeah. So, what was life like growing up over there for you?
It was really fun for me. You know, we had the creek. Did you ever go play in the creek back there?
Yeah, behind Bertie.
Yeah,
Oh,
it ran
yeah.
behind my
Yeah.
house. Yeah, so we used to play in the creek back there and just.
That's
You know,
so funny. I
Yeah,
had
we
no
did
idea.
all of that back there. I mean, it was such the community. Everyone used to come and play in our community all the time. So, my house, we had like all the balls and jump ropes and you know everything. So everyone would come on our street and would play. You know, it was just I don't remember a time in childhood where there was anything where I felt like I couldn't do. Like it just I felt like I had so much nourishment. Community was really big in my community. I remember if someone had a death in the family, everybody on the street would cook. You know, it was just all of those different things that I remember growing up. It was like a true village, you know, in my community. So I don't remember having any really bad experiences growing up.
No, it's not like that now. I mean,
No,
it's as I worked over at South Central, which is now that's South Central. Every other house, a drug house over there.
Yeah.
Bertie Alexander's still standing. I'm
Yeah,
surprised
it
because
is.
Of all the schools that have been torn down and rebuilt, that's still the original
is.
building's still standing there. So where'd you go to high school?
I went to Booker T. Washington High School for the Performing and Visual Arts.
Oh, tell us about that.
If I ever had to do any part of life over, it'd be high school. So that was an experience that I would say I can't replace that experience. It was so immersed and so engulfed in the arts. I totally enjoyed everything about it, you know. And we had the academic curriculum as well. But you felt like a professional artist the entire time you were at school. And there was this expectation that you would act like a professional artist while you were at school. So I think that it was one of those things that, you know, it's really hard to tell anyone else that goes to a regular school because we didn't have sports. I was a dancer. And so that was the sport. Like dancers were the athletes of the school. We were the athletes. And so it would be someone playing their instrument in the hallway. You have a dancer dancing down the hallway and a singer singing to the song and the dance. So you like had all of these arts that came together. Then you have a visual artist who's drawing what they see and hear and all of these things that were just so great and dynamic about it. Everybody just kind of blended everything, you know, and it wasn't like a reality in school, you know, and it's strange to say that because I enjoyed it so much, but it just wasn't like most people's high school experience, you know.
Different world.
Totally different world.
Sounds like a Disney movie.
It felt like a Disney movie.
So that Gaston just breaks out in the hallway and starts
No, seriously.
singing.
Seriously. Like we would throw down some cardboard and you'll have some kids breakdancing over here, you know, you have some ballerinas.
Theater sets being built in the background at the same time.
Exactly.
Okay, so speaking of breakdancing, Do you remember the movies that came out in the 80s?
You had Breaking,
Yep.
Colors.
You remember Breaking 2? Remember they did a sequel to that. Danny likes it.
I don't know about
It's Breaking 2 Electric Boogaloo. Do you remember that?
Oh, I do remember Electric Boogaloo.
Yeah.
I do.
I always bring it up.
I'm going to hit stop and we're going to start the recording over again.
He's got to go to the dentist after this for grinding his teeth.
Yeah. It's a power down for him. I love it.
Back to being serious.
Yeah.
So you did dance.
I did.
What kind of dance? Classical, interpretive?
Oh, I did
all of it.
I did
Jazz.
all of it. I did. So there you have to take modern and ballet. Those were your core classes that you had to take. But then I studied world dance, and so I did a little African dance. We did tap, some jazz. Once I got in college, I kind of went a little bit further with world dance, but primarily in high school, that's what they offered us. Was like the African dance, and we had some hip hop come in a little bit, not much. We had more jazz because we had older teachers, and we had teachers that were classically trained. People from Juilliard and things like that.
So you
coming
get
in
the
teaching
classic
us.
fundamentals.
Yeah, we got a lot of the classic fundamentals, which I truly enjoyed. I never had the ballerina body though. So, being cast in those parts. So I had to deal with those things as a teenage kid. Trying to figure out my way in that world was really hard because you have girls who have been dancing since they were 3. Honestly, I only went there because I didn't want to go to Carter. So I auditioned just because. And, it was one of those things. I was always one of those people who I didn't want to go to the next level of school with the same people I had been going to school with. And so I would try another school. So instead of going to, I think it was Halsey, wasn't that the feeder school?
Yeah.
I went to Atwell.
I went to Atwell too, and then Griner one year.
Yeah. And then from there, I went to arts. And so I was always wanting to see a new group of individuals and meet new people and experience new things. And so an entire time while I was in high school, it was just, it was like a new experience all the time. We had teachers coming in, guest teachers. We had students from all across the country. We had kids it was like college almost. We had students whose parents were, living in California, and they would buy them an apartment down here. They would have an apartment.
So did you feel like you didn't get a regular teen upbringing, like as far as the high school experience?
No, It wasn't at all. Yeah, not at all. It almost felt like being a performer and, having to get your schoolwork. I chose to work, after I turned 16, I chose to work just because I wanted to have my own money. And then like buying my leotards and my toe shoes and all of those things that were so expensive, I didn't want my parents to have to, deal with that. So I got a job so I could pay for those things. And
What was your first job?
Oh, my first job, I was working in Redbird Mall.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, in the store.
It was nice back in the day.
It was back in the day. It
Joe
was
had
called
a job
Coda.
at Redbird Mall too.
No.
Oh, so everything else has been going that way.
No, she won up me there. I didn't even work at Redbird.
Yeah, I worked there, and it was in a clothing store I think it was called Coda. I think that's what it was called. It was a men's clothing store, and so
Coda.
Yeah, it was like they had like hip hop clothes or something like that. I just remember it was men's clothing, and so I worked there and danced and still had to maintain my GPA.
Did you dance at Coda when you were working?
Actually, I did.
Yeah, I can see that.
Well, that's because all of my
kill the
dancer
time.
friends. I had several friends that danced with me also
Nice.
who were also there. So yeah, we kind of made fun.
Redbird Mall. I grew up going there. My brother and I would go there, and I remember Chick-fil-A. That was the only Chick-fil-A in town.
It was.
I remember they'd stand out front with a platter with the samples.
Yeah.
And then that was before they had any standalone stores
Right.
in Dallas area. Yeah, Redbird Mall used to be a magical place for a teen.
Yeah, it did.
Do you remember? I don't know if the theater was still open when you were over there. It had to be, but
U8?
It wasn't there. It was the one that was at Polk and Hampton, and there was a Tom Thumb over there, and there was a little theater.
I remember that one. Sat in the corner back there.
Yeah.
And then they had the Mott's store.
Yep,
Remember
the Mott's. Yep.
Yeah, I
We
remember
go there
that.
all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw the original Halloween there at that theater when I was only 4. Which is thinking back, my parents they just wanted me out of the house. But
Did
anyway.
they leave you there while you were 4?
No, my older brother, who was 10 years older than me, took me. So he was 14 watching Halloween, and I was 4.
Wow.
Yeah.
So much for PG.
Oh, there were no ratings back then. They didn't give
This makes all sorts of sense now.
Yeah. Hey, we should have had. She needs to come back as a guest co-host. She could run this whole
All
thing
day long. I could do this. Let's do it.
All right. Well,
You tell
careful
me
what you
when.
wish for.
Hey, you tell me when.
So, what drew you to dance? I know you went there, but once you got there, what did you enjoy most about it?
The challenge.
Okay.
It was such a challenge for me. Coming from being a track runner and gymnast, it making my body move in those ways and being able to hyperextend out of my joints and all of these different things that, of course, give me problems now. But, I mean, it was those things like that. It was always the challenge. I really enjoyed learning. It was something new, and because it was so new for me, and I didn't have that background like a lot of the girls, I had to work harder. And so with working harder, I took my summers and things like that where I was taking dance classes. I would be in my house doing my own bar routines. You know, I would do all of these things just to make sure that I was able to just compete with the competition that I had at the school, because we were always competing amongst each other. It was a healthy competition, but it was always a competition that was there because, you know, you want to be cast in all the shows. You want to, you know, you don't want to be an understudy in something. And sometimes that's what your role was. You were just an understudy, because if you had someone that came in and they liked this dancer better, or they liked this body type better or something like that, then okay, you had to work harder to be just that. And so it was a lot of pressure there, I think. But it was good pressure. Some people cracked under that pressure. We did have some girls that had to leave. There were a lot of eating disorders. There were a lot of psychological issues that went on because, of course, you're going through puberty. Your brain is changing. You have all of these different things that are going on, and you're in this semi-professional world. And so it could take its toll on an individual. So that gave me a lot of mental strength to deal with a lot of the things that I deal with as an adult. You know, stage fright. I don't have stage fright anymore. I can talk to anybody. You can put me anywhere. And it just doesn't bother me because I've fallen on my face in front of 10,000 people. So
I might be jumping ahead a little bit, but just
okay.
being inoculated to that kind of stress, what did that do for you as a police officer, especially like going through the academy and having to perform in front of peers, in front of instructors, like, you know what I'm getting at, especially in scenarios.
Yeah. Everything for me, it would come as just that. I was acting, you know. And so even on the street sometimes, some of it becomes an act. You know, sometimes some of my favorite calls to go to are CIT calls before they would call CIT calls. Because when you deal with someone who's in crisis and they don't know that they're in crisis, and you have to be in the moment with that person. You know, I remember one time I was on training, and this lady, she swore that aliens were coming through her windows, and all she wanted to do was foil paper her windows. So I went to the dollar store, me and my trainer. We went to the dollar store and we bought foil paper. And I came back and I foil papered that lady's windows with her. And that lady never called again. She had been calling all day. You know, she just wanted someone to come there because that's what she felt. She felt like aliens were coming through her window. So I was in the moment with that lady for, you know, just that amount of time. And she appreciated that. And for her, that was her reality. So it's sometimes being able to act, being able to, you know, make someone feel like you're there with them. You understand what's going on. I'll never understand what that lady was going through, just to be honest, because fortunately I don't have any psychological issues that cause me to be in that mental space. But if I was, I want somebody to take that time with me and just try to understand me in that moment, you know. And so I didn't take that for granted with her in that moment. And so, yeah, being in the academy and, you know, going through scenarios and going through all these different things, I always tell myself whenever I'm faced with a new challenge that it's only temporary. Get through it. Just get through it. And so the academy, of course, you have a lot of mental strains. You're thinking about, okay, I got to pass this test. I have to do this. Everybody's looking at me. You know, I have to get through this academy because this is a job or a career, you know. So I had to get in that mind space. I had to get in that mindset to understand that in order to get through this, you just have to be in the moment. You have to get through it. You have to focus. And that's pretty much how I get through a lot of stressful situations, even though I don't want to be in that situation. The hardest thing for me going through the academy was the gun range. And so someone once told me, when there's something that you hate doing, you continue to do it until you learn to love it. And so I go out to the range once a week now. I try to go out to the range at least once a week now. And it's comfortable for me now. It's something that I like to do. It's a stress reliever. But these are things that I had to learn, that I hated to do, that I had to learn to love to do. And so across the board, everything in life that's a challenge for me, if I hate doing it, I continue to do it until it's something that I learn to appreciate. Because it's such a challenge for me that it's something that I feel like in order to overcome that challenge, it has to be, you have to break it down to fundamentals. I tell my son, like with math, he's really good at math. And I tell him, everything breaks down to addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, no matter what type of math you're doing. If you learn the fundamentals, you will be just fine. You just have to know when to apply them. And so he's really good at math, but that's his challenge. I have my challenges. Everyone has their challenges. And I think it's just about our perspective and how we approach them instead of shutting down. And I'm human, of course. I have my initial shutdowns, and my blocks and my reservations. And I have to ask myself internally, what are those reservations? Why do I have those reservations? Why am I dealing with those reservations the way that I am? Is it something in my past, the reason why that I'm having these reservations with what I'm dealing with and the stress that I have wrapped around whatever the situation it is that I'm in? And so with that, that's how I get through everything,
What I hear from you is extreme work ethic, but also you're not comfortable being average or mediocre at anything you do. I mean, and that goes back to your work ethic you put in of actually caring to be, you worked harder in school to compete because you wanted to be good at it. And that says a lot about you as a person and your reputation now as a police officer and as a detective and now as a supervisor over detectives. That's what your reputation is now. You may not even be aware of what people say, but that's what they say. And I mean, look, it sounds like it goes back to you being in high school of establishing a strong foundation for yourself. Because there's a lot of people who just be comfortable being average, getting by. You didn't want to. That's not you.
That was never. That was never me. Not even as a kid. When I was younger. If I had a test, I would be up at 4 a.m. in the morning studying for a test that I've already studied for, that I already know the material. And so my parents used to always wonder, because they were like, this girl is going to have a nervous breakdown by the time she's 10. So I had to be top academic student. I had to be all these different things. I had to win at the science fair. I even told my parents, when I stopped winning first place in track, I'm done. And I went all the way to state and still was winning. And my mom was like, okay, so you went to state and you won, and now what? And I was just like, I don't know, maybe I'll try something new. And so, it was just one of those things where my parents, they never tried to talk me down off of something. I know I probably drove them crazy because I was in everything. But it was always for me one of those things where I didn't see it that way. I didn't see it as I was trying to be better. I was trying to be more than mediocre. I always saw it as
trying to be challenged.
Yes.
That's what you said earlier.
Yes. Yeah. And being challenged for me, I'm like my only competitor. I don't look at anyone else and say, I want to be better than you at this. I don't look at anyone else and say, I want to be as good as them. I say I want to be the best me I can in this and in this moment and in this, whatever this field or whatever it is that I'm doing. I want to be the best me that I can be in the midst of it. And so, yes, I would have to say that's what it is. I enjoy being challenged.
So people respond to pressure in usually two different ways, right? You can either say pressure is a horrible thing and I don't want it.
Right.
Or you can look at it and say pressure is a privilege.
Mm-hmm.
And I've told everybody, my kids, pressure is a privilege.
It is.
We don't ever put pressure on people that can't handle it.
Right.
Or that aren't capable. And so when you accept pressure as a privilege, you've capitalized on that and obviously ridden that horse all the way to the finish line.
Yeah. Hopefully it doesn't ride me at some point.
Speaking of a strong work ethic and thirst for knowledge, you go into college. Where did you go to school?
I went to Sam Houston State.
Okay, shout out Sam Houston State.
Yeah.
What were your majors?
I double majored in dance and biology with a pre-med emphasis. I had a dance scholarship and an academic scholarship. And so I went there. I had turned down offers to Florida A&M, and MIT, and because I wanted to pay for college myself. I knew I couldn't afford MIT, even though I really wanted to go there. I don't like the cold either, so that wasn't going to work. But Florida, I didn't like it much. It was a party school. I wasn't really a party type, so that didn't work for me. So I came back and I went to junior college. I went to El Centro for one semester because I told my teachers at Booker T, they actually graduated from Sam Houston as well. And so with speaking to some of them, they were like, why don't you try this school? And I was like, I really don't want to go there. My parents wanted me to go to UNT or Texas Women's or something like that. And I was like, nope, that's too close to home. And so, I never really wanted to stay too close, but didn't want to go too far either. I wanted to be, somewhere they could at least drive to. But when I went to Sam Houston, I majored in both of those. I graduated in 3.5 years from there doing both. And when I first got there, my advisor, he said, it's going to take you at least 5 years. I said, no, it's going to take me less than that. I have a 4-year scholarship. I said, and I'm paying for school. I have to get out of here in at least 4 years. So I did. I got out of there in 3.5 years, and it was a blur. It was a complete blur. I took the max hours. I was in the dean's office as if I was in trouble all the time because I had to get permission to take as many hours as I was taking each semester. And the dean, he said, you're going to really, really burn yourself out. I said, as long as I keep pushing, I said, I won't. I'll be
temporary.
done. It's temporary.
Over in a
That's
little bit.
exactly what I kept telling myself. It's only temporary. I said, I'll only have this amount of years. I said, I still want to go to medical school. I said, so I still want to do this while I still have the energy to do it. Now, looking back on it, if knowing what I know now, I probably would have just taken the MCAT and skipped college, gotten my basics out of the way, took the MCAT and went straight to medical school. But I didn't. And I didn't know that you could even do that. I didn't know that was an option at the time.
Dance is still a part of your life then too, so
I
you're trying to
love
keep
dance.
it. Yeah.
I do. I love to dance. And so it was one of those things that was kind of like my stress reliever. I'll go to a biology class. I'll come in from a lab. I slide into the rehearsals. I leave there. I go back to a lab. I'm getting home at like 10 o'clock at night. And I'm back up at 8 o'clock. I always had an 8 o'clock class. I always made sure I had an early class because I was just that kid that wanted to be done by noon.
I was the exact opposite.
Most people
I
were.
wouldn't sign up for anything that started before 10 o'clock.
That's most people. My 8 o'clock classes were always empty. So that's why I liked them, Cause
and you got parking. He probably was the one trying to find a spot, and he parks where you shouldn't, and then get a ticket.
It was a bike. It was always a bike for me. Yeah.
That's smart.
Yeah.
So you pre-med, so you wanted to get in the medical field.
I did.
What were your original goals whenever you chose those majors?
Well, from the age of 10, I wanted to be a mortician. I wanted to own my own funeral home.
Wow.
As I got older, I realized that most funeral homes are corporately run. And I always told myself I never want to be part of corporate America. Nothing to people who like corporate America, but that was just never me. I was always a free spirit. I said, nah, I don't think I want corporate America for myself. So, but as I got older and as I started to see different things and I got a little bit more experience and I got to talk to a few more people who were in the medical field, then that kind of changed. I wanted to be a forensic pathologist and work as a medical examiner. And so I went through college and then I did an internship. And I was really fortunate because there was no one that would allow anyone who was not in medical school to do an internship. And Dr. Rohr in McKinney actually allowed me to do an internship in McKinney Medical Examiner's Office.
What drew you to that field, mortuary science?
I don't know. I really don't know.
That is a very different
it is.
type of and interest.
Yeah.
Going from dance to It's a lot of death.
Were you looking for reality, living in the dance and art world so much that you felt like you needed to put one foot into reality and be exposed to something more?
I felt like I wasn't going to make enough money in dance.
For sure. For sure.
That's a reality.
There's that too. Yeah.
just being honest. I as much as I like to dance and as much as I love to dance, as far as it being I was like, it's a gamble if you marry rich and, if you marry at all, so I didn't want to depend on that. But like I said, as a kid, I always grew up knowing that that's something that I wanted to do. Why I chose mortuary science, I don't know. I wasn't like killing cats or anything. So, I mean, I wasn't into anything weird like that.
If you were, I'm not judging. But.
Oh, no, it's okay. It's okay.
But no, that is very different. But dying is part of of living, and
True.
that you're plenty of job security going into that field.
I think that was part of it too. Thinking about the job security of it, I always knew whatever I wanted to do, that it was going to be something that would be a job that'll never go away. And so that was always something that I thought about, even as a small child growing up, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to do something that I knew would always be relevant and
always be a demand for.
Right. Yeah.
Well, and also, once you started working at interning at the medical examiner, can you describe how that went for you starting off of seeing all death and just you see the aftermath of violence, right? Can you kind of describe to the listener how that went for you starting off?
Starting off at first, I didn't know how I was going to be. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what touching death was like. I didn't know what seeing someone in their moment of death, what that was like. And it's just breathtaking. To see someone in their moments of death, like to see someone that's there, that died, however they died, is one of those things that you can't take for granted, because I became very interested in how that person lived when I saw how they died. And so for me, an autopsy, looking at the person, it's a little bit gruesome. You're using, saws, and you're cutting diaphragms and skulls and bones, and you hear it's very auditory. So you hear these sounds, but it's also quiet. And so while doing them, it was very surreal, because you had this person who was once a person, somebody's loved one, right there, and
somebody's child.
Yeah, somebody's child, and you're manipulating and mutilating basically this person's body, just to find out how they died. But their family wants answers, so you have a duty to do so. And so I think for me, I became so much more interested in how the person lived. The investigations for me took too long. And that's really kind of what brought me into police work, because I wanted to know more about, how did you get here? I saw people who committed suicide. One lady, I remember, she had died from inhalation of too many chemicals. One guy, he drowned. I saw all these different states. One child was born with spina bifida. And so I saw these different things that made me realize that, and I say this now with being a homicide, death puts life into perspective. And so with seeing that, with seeing so much death, with seeing so much of how people were at that moment, and I think in the back of my head, I wonder if this person would have chosen to die this way, or would have wanted to die this way. Like, what is their story? And so I became so much more interested in that one day it was an officer who worked Plano PD, and a good friend of his was there. He had committed suicide. He had put a gun in his mouth in a parking lot in one of the movie theaters out there in Plano. And so his friend is there on the table, and he comes in, and he's just standing there, and he's looking at his friend. Of course, he's an officer. He has to give a death notification to his friend's family that he had just found his friend that he grew up with, in this state. And so I was standing there talking to him, and I just kind of looked at him and I said, you need a moment? He said, yeah, I think I do. And so he sat there and he looked at his friend, and I'm tearing up because at that moment, that's when I realized I'm more concerned about people living and not people dying. Even though I kind of came full circle and I work homicide, how did somebody get there? Like, life in a whole. Like, I really care about how that happened. How did we get here? How did you get there? That's what's more important for me, And after, I remember that officer asked me, he said, have you ever thought about going into investigations, like going into police work? I was like, absolutely not. And so he says, he had gathered his bearings, and he says, you should. And so maybe 2 years later, it was a commercial playing on the radio talking about joining Dallas Police Department. And at the time, I had actually gotten a corporate job, something I was totally against. Working, like, it was a medical job, but it was a corporate, very, very corporate job. And I told myself, I said, a year from the day that I start this job, I will be gone. And the day I started that job, a year later, I was starting the police academy.
How old were you?
24. Yeah.
So you had interactions with detectives and when you were working at the ME's office, right? How was that for you? Did that lead you to the path of DPD? You think, interacting with them and seeing investigations put together and how they work?
No, because I really didn't get to see in depth how the investigations worked on their end. I just knew for me that I had this real affinity for learning more about the individual, learning why they got there, learning how they got there, learning what their life was like before. So that, to me, I think is what kind of pushed me over the edge a little bit to want to become a police officer. Now, everything else in between, of course, the excitement, all the things you get to do as soon as you're out of the academy, weren't necessarily what I thought would be my path into investigations, because I really enjoyed it. Once I was in it, I was like, oh, I like this. I'm out here and it's all exciting and the adrenaline rush. And so that was exciting too. And that was my time on the streets.
Southwest Dallas.
Southwest, yeah. Same area I grew up in. Yeah. The same area I patrolled.
Do you feel like that was tougher, or would it have been easier to go work somewhere else? Or was it easier to do it where you grew up?
Geographically, yeah, it was easier for me to do it where I grew up. I knew a lot of people there. I actually did Vice. I worked with Vice one time over there. And so it wasn't easy to do the prostitution thing over there because everyone knew my parents. And I remember I was walking up Camp Wisdom one day and this guy was like, I'm going to tell your dad. Like, okay.
Wow. So the listeners, they've never heard about these kind of little, I know the process and these prostitution. Can you kind of describe what you had to do on these things?
Oh, it was so gross. Yeah. My hat's off to people who work Vice because I just couldn't do it. I mean,
there's some people who enjoy it.
Oh, it's some people who love it. Like they love getting dirty.
Sickos.
They love being out there, and I just couldn't do it. And I guess I couldn't do it because I saw doctors, I saw lawyers. One guy pulled up, he had a picture of his family on the dashboard. And I'm just sitting here thinking, your poor wife and kids has no clue.
So what are you doing? You're hanging out on the street corner or walking down the strip?
Yeah, just walking down the strip.
And just waiting for someone to holler at you.
Yeah. And I remember one day this older guy tried to tell this younger guy. He was like, nope, not that one. Nope, she's clean. She's clean, not that one. And so he calls me over there. He was like, all I have is a dime bag and a 2-piece. I was like, I'm sitting here thinking to myself, I have been resorted to a 2-piece and a pepper.
Wow.
With a bag of wheat.
You got to have the pepper, though.
Got to have the pepper, I guess. He could at least throw in a honey biscuit or something.
Yeah. You're worth way more than that. Jessica.
At least I thought. I was
Such
like, dang,
well,
I couldn't even get a half of a chicken breast or something.
Damn.
Yeah.
So what did you enjoy most? You said the excitement, the adrenaline rush. What got you going and working the streets? And what did you originally get in the thought process of how it was going to be to what it actually was?
I didn't know what to expect. Being honest, I really didn't know what to expect. My dad was totally against it. You know, he had worked DEA in the early days of DEA and he
Really?
had gotten out
Oh,
of
boy.
it. Yeah. And he was like, I want you to never go into law enforcement. And the day I came and told him I was going to law enforcement, I thought he was going to have a heart attack. And so, but once I graduated the academy, of course, he was very proud of me nonetheless. But for me, I was always an adrenaline junkie anyway. I wanted to race cars. I wanted to do all these things, you know.
You had all that
growing
at
up.
Southwest.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah, this is true. Yeah. But you know, I didn't know what to expect. So every day for me was a new experience, and I went into it with that mindset that every day is a new experience. And I think it was a little more comfortable for me, you know, to your question, because I was in a community I grew up in. And so with knowing the streets, knowing the areas that are the worst, knowing where hooks, you know, tuck and hide things and where they go strip cars and all of these different things, I knew those things already.
You knew your way around the creek.
Yeah, I knew I knew my way around the creek, so I knew where to go look for everything. And so
Bertie Alexander gangsters over there.
yeah.
So did you have any mentors at Southwest that kind of helped you along, you looked up to?
You know, I won't say mentors per se, but I had people who really took me under their wing and was like, hey, look, this is the way you do these things, you know. I think when it comes to mentorship, I think all of us have a level of mentorship in us if other people will be accepting to that. And so I looked at everyone. I looked at everything that everyone did that was senior to me, whether they were just a senior PO or corporal or sergeant or whomever. If that individual had something that I thought was valuable, regardless, and they didn't even have to be senior to me. They could have been someone who was, you know, same at level with me, but had a little bit more life experience. And so I didn't take that for granted. You know, I looked at those individuals. I had some really great sergeants. I had really great trainers. And even those who weren't so great, you know, I still learned something from them. I learned how not to be.
Yeah.
I learned what more I needed to do this job efficiently. And so did I do it perfectly? Absolutely not. I don't know anyone who has or does. And, but I really appreciated my experience that I had in patrol. And I always tell people I keep a uniform that fits, because any of us can go back to patrol any day.
You never know.
Yeah, you never know.
It happen any day.
Yeah, it could. It really could.
Our uniforms have changed drastically since we hired
Yes,
on.
they
though.
have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like we got Class C's now. Even
I know.
Class
I
B's
saw
and
that.
C's. And
Yeah.
C's
people
and a
only
half.
wear their Class A's for funerals and
Right.
court. Or
Mhm.
I don't even know if they wear them to court anymore.
I don't
No,
think so.
I think they can wear Class B's now in
Oh,
court
boy.
too.
Yeah.
We used to jump fences, chase bad guys, and
Wearing those little silver buttons that popped off every
All
time.
the
Yeah.
time.
Dig through nasty cars. Yeah.
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 keep a Ziploc bag of all those buttons for when they pop off
Yeah.
and replace them.
And you always lose the little DVDs for your collar.
Always.
Yeah.
Break off.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So you promote to senior corporal, and I want to get into child exploitation. What you applied for that? How'd that go? I want you to explain that unit to the listener, because we've never talked about that unit on this podcast.
Okay.
What that entire investigative unit actually does.
So how I met Byron Fassett was that he was starting that unit. And when he was starting that unit, he came out to Southwest and he was like, does anybody want to help us look for teen prostitutes? I used to raise my hand for everything because I just didn't know. You know, I wanted to learn something new. So I was like, sure, I'll go out there and do it. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And so it was just before I took the senior corporal test. And I was going out there and, you know, helping look for these girls and young boys. And he says, after I had taken the test, and I was still waiting on my scores, and he said, well, if you promote, he was like, I have an opening coming up. I'd never thought about it. I'd never thought about working in that field at all. Like, it never, ever crossed my mind. And
Where did you think you might end up after patrol?
I don't know. Honestly, I didn't see past patrol.
You're just living the dream at the time.
I was just living the dream. I didn't see past patrol. I didn't have, I don't think I had any like true ambitions to do anything great because I was still learning. I knew I didn't know a lot. In my opinion, I was like, I still don't know a lot, but I just felt like I was learning so much and it was so much coming at me every day that I was like, I'm never going to get it all, and I still haven't gotten it all, And so I just, I didn't think past that.
That's crazy because looking at your resume, it looks like you were destined for where you're at now and that you methodically went step by step to break that down. I mean, even all the way back to your elementary school days of understanding what you wanted to do.
Ironically, homicide came, they had asked me to go before. I had applied a couple of times and didn't get it. And I was really liking where I was. I had gone back to ICAC and sex offenders. I had the sex offender registration and sex offender apprehension and ICAC all at the same time.
And that was a fairly new unit as well, right? Was ICAC was just getting going?
No,
too?
ICAC was there.
Was already established?
Yeah, so Byron Fass, he started
Child X.
Okay. He started ICAC and then sex offender.
Maybe you can explain what ICAC is for people listening.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, I just threw that.
No, you're good.
We all do that.
No, because it's like we talk about. I have a lot of civilians that listen to this, and they'll let me know. They'll be writing in saying, "Hey, tell us what this acronym means," because something that's common for us, they don't know it. Like CIT, like the CIT call that Sarge mentioned earlier. That's like a mental health call. Right. Somebody's acting, have mental issues out in the street. They're now called CIT calls.
Right.
So it's crisis intervention calls. So.
Maybe you can even back up to the Child X, like explain what you were doing.
Yes.
There.
Talk about
this whole episode over again. Yeah. Explain everything.
Yeah. Stop derailing. So Child X, it was Facet. I know Facet. He's a great dude. He actually worked out there in 24 in Rockwall. Great guy. But he started this, and he wanted you to be a part of it from the get-go.
Yeah, him and Bill Walsh started this. Bill Walsh is over the Dallas Children's Advocacy Center. So they both started it, and their mission was to work with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And so in that, what they did was they created the Child Exploitation Unit, and from that branched off the Internet Crimes Against Children, or ICAC as we know it. And so he had asked me to come and work there, and he asked me to apply, and so I applied for it. Didn't think I would get it. I'm like, I'm totally green off the street, don't know anything, and so I even asked him later, why was I chosen? And he was like, well, you would come out and help and do the work. You showed an interest, and so that unit was. It was an experience. You get to see children. Children are extremely resilient. Especially when you're talking about children who have been sexually abused. So a lot of the children and child exploitation, the difference in child exploitation and child abuse deals with families and children being sexually abused. Child exploitation, we deal with non-familial. And so it was with that, I think some of the hardest interviews I've ever watched are the forensic interviews with some of those children who were so incredibly resilient, who showed very little emotion around the tragedy that had happened to them. And they're able to just sit there and talk about it as if it's so, just a very matter of factual thing. And so from that, people talk about compartmentalization. And compartmentalization, when you're dealing with children, the most vulnerable individuals, the ones that as adults we think we're supposed to protect. And you sit there and you listen to a child talk about the worst thing that you can only imagine happening to them in a manner that is almost like you and I just having this simple conversation. They would sit there and talk about it just like that. Maybe they'll doodle. Maybe they'll play with a toy. They're doing something very childlike, and they're telling you this story that is incredibly grown up. It is incredibly adult. Everything about it is something that you wouldn't even imagine on your worst day, that could happen. And so I grew up a lot in that. because those kids made me grow up, because I had to be able to sit there and listen to that story without my whole entire mindset on society changing. And in a way, it kind of did, because I had just had my first child when I got there.
So I was going to ask if you had a child.
I had just had my first son. And so for me, that became, it was almost to the point for a moment, he couldn't go visit family alone. He couldn't go to cousins. He couldn't go to anyone, and not without me there or without his dad there, because it was so fresh in my mind, all of these stories. Everything about these children was so fresh in my mind. And the interviews with the suspects. It is so incredibly weird to sit there and speak to someone and you talk to them and they have this attraction for a child just as significant as one of us having an attraction for an adult. And they didn't understand what was wrong with that. That just blew my mind. That completely blew my mind. And I'll never forget an interview once, and this guy was talking about this little girl. She was 5 years old, and he was saying how she came on to him and how she provoked him because she was wearing just a t-shirt and her underwear. The same thing you see every little girl in when she goes to bed. She's just wearing her little Cinderella nightgown t-shirt and her underwear. That's completely innocent to the rest of us. And to that individual, she was seducing him.
How hard was it for you to process this? Starting off, you're getting all this and you have a new child. How hard was it for you going home at night to compartmentalize yourself?
It was very hard in the beginning. Like I said, I had my reservations about everyone in the beginning. And I think that the thing that helped me get through it was, in turn, also seeing just how resilient those children were. So in the back of my mind, I kind of thought about, if they can deal with this now at the age of whatever, then let me be the adult and meet them where they are. Because these children, most of them were not, they didn't have a victim mindset. And to me, that was incredible. Like, you got these little kids, they didn't have a victim mindset. Like, you would have the worst of the worst happening to some of these small children. But then you have some people where it was just a touch or it was just unwanted contact. And they would have the worst breakdown, in the room. And I don't know if it was because they were thinking about what could have happened or just how it made them feel in that moment. But then when you talk to the children who were actually, they had to deal with the penetration, they had to deal with the constant, sexual assaults. Those children were incredible.
Well, they learned survival skills themselves.
Absolutely.
They had to.
Absolutely.
That was their reality. What
Absolutely.
we hear about these stories and then we can't imagine it. That is their reality.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh. So you go from child exploitations, you go to internet crimes against children, ICAC is what it's called. And we're actually going to have Detective Godwin on from Garland PD. He's been doing it 18 years. And
Godwin.
Yeah. And he's going to come in and talk about what the whole episode's going to be about that. I want to raise awareness, too, for a lot of just individuals and also just parents out there of what to avoid. So how was that transition going from child exploitation, extremely heavy, depressing unit, to go to another one that's similar but different?
It was harder going to ICAC. And the reason it was harder,
Visual?
not only visual, in child exploitation, I knew my victim. In child exploitation, I was able to get justice for my victim that I knew, someone I touched. In ICAC, I have no idea if that child was getting any justice. I have no idea if that child is being trafficked right now. I have no idea if that child is even still alive. So I think for me, it was harder. It was much harder going over to ICAC. And I didn't even realize that until after. I had to do therapy after ICAC.
What about ICAC? I mean, you just talked about that, all the unknowns that you had to deal with and juggle. And are there some cases, if you can talk about them, that stuck with you?
I'll never forget one. You see my eyes swelling. One thing we never did was turn the audio up when we received the videos. And there's a reason for that. I'll never forget the one where it was a infant. That infant child was being sodomized. They had this child tied up by its legs, hanging upside down, while this woman, beat this child with a whip and stuffed ice cubes in her vagina. I accidentally had the volume on that day, and all you hear are the excruciating screams of this baby. I'll never forget that. Never. Never.
Yeah, I can't imagine, and I can't imagine working that unit. And I know a lot of the detectives that were over there, and I believe that the shelf life for being that exposed to that kind of just humanity and it has to be a short lived.
The volume you're dealing with too. I
Yeah.
mean, my guess would. Child X would be a little different where you're working on a case and maybe you're working on one incident or several with one child.
Yeah.
But the amount of volume you get in ICAC.
And it has gotten worse. I think last year they may have gotten like 24,000 cases or 24,000. And when I say cases, I'm just talking about, you have one case may have a terabyte of images in it.
Yes. And then once again, speaking to the volume.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like you said, one incident could have 5,000 images.
Absolutely.
5,000 videos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, that crime, I actually may get you back in here for Godwin's episode.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Perspective,
Oh,
yes.
yeah.
He is, he's an expert at it.
Yeah,
And
Tony has done it for years.
yes, and almost 2 decades of that, and we'll have to get you back for that one if you're up for
absolutely.
it.
Yeah.
So you had to go see a therapy after that.
I did.
Was that the first time you've actually, because of something you experienced on this job, to go
Yeah.
and seek counseling?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It was more so because I couldn't get that out of my head. I could not get that image out of my head. I could not get that child's screams out of my head. And, people say, how can you look at so much death? How can you see, because majority of what I see are adults who are dead, right? With the exception of a few children. But with that, I was like, this child is alive. Like this is happening. This is really happening. I can't reach in this computer screen and get this child out of there. I can't get them out of that situation. And it was actually in another country at that, which bothered me even more, because now you try to do an Interpol, notification, and it goes nowhere. I have no jurisdiction in Taiwan, or I have no jurisdiction in the Netherlands. But that started to bother me. It started to bother me that I don't know if this person is getting justice. All I know is that the individual who's trading these images or who's trading these videos, that's who I'm going after. This may not even be the perpetrator. More than likely it's not, unless it's something that is self-produced. We rarely ever found someone who did self-production. There were a few, but for the most part, we didn't find very many people who self-produced.
Well, yeah. So what about these people then who are trading then? As far as like a profile of them and their mindset, you talked about Child X, where some of these people had the attraction towards kids, and it was justified in their mind. What's the difference in someone who's involved in trading digital materials of kids?
It's not much difference.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not much difference. In their mind, it is, though. You'll even talk to some people who trade images, and they feel almost like they are better than a person who actually
Produced it or made it.
Yeah, produced or who actually sexually assaults children. But it's only a matter of time, because you are what you see. You are what you continue to watch. So that individual who continues to watch child porn at some point will probably, they'll probably assault a child at some point. If they have it escalates. If they have the opportunity, they'll likely do so. But some people think it's less of a crime because I'm only looking at images. I don't understand that mindset.
They rationalize it themselves.
They do.
It's like some, even people with a certain type of narcissism.
Right.
They do rationalize themselves. They're not that bad. Or
Yeah.
How long did you stay there in that unit?
I was there only a year before I promoted out of ICAC.
Okay.
I think that was about all I could take as far as looking at those images all the time.
And good for you for recognizing that.
Yeah, I had to.
And being a new parent.
That. Yeah, I did.
So you promote to sergeant, and you go back out on the streets for a brief time, and then you go to
Public integrity.
another unit we have not talked about on this.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
I did not know you were in PIU.
Oh yeah, that's when I first met you. Came out and
Yeah.
taught a class, and you're a sergeant in PIU. I'd seen you, but actually met you, and you were
Yeah.
teaching something in core or
I think
whatever.
it was procedural justice.
It was,
Yeah.
yes. You were out teaching that.
You know what you're missing in here is the RBT instructor.
I didn't get to be an RBT instructor.
I thought you were. Or you're coming out
I did
just
PVOC.
helping? I know you did PVOC. I
Yeah.
thought you were out there helping.
Oh, I did. I used to get shot all the time.
Yeah?
Oh,
I
we were,
did.
yeah. When Navarro and
Yes.
Winslow. and
That's
them
how
guys-
I met
yeah.
Jessica. Was
Yeah, that
years
is
ago
how
at
we met.
RBT.
Yeah, that is,
And then
yeah.
you disappeared. And I
well,
wondered
yeah.
where you were. And now I'm looking at this sheet and I see where you disappeared to. You disappeared to all these places I couldn't go.
Yeah, wouldn't want to go. Yeah, you literally. I mean, we're going to get by the end of this episode. We're going to talk about all of the ponds that you dipped your toe in this department and all this experience you've gathered. Because and you still got more to go, obviously.
Yeah.
But public integrity, again, for the listener, everybody here knows what it is. Can you kind of tell the listener what that unit is?
So that unit it's like you police the police. Basically, if there is any type of criminal activity or anything that they believe is criminal that's happening within, for us, we handle city workers, anything below city hall level.
Code enforcement.
Yeah, code enforcement. If they were like sanitation workers, water company, all of that. We did all of those, including police. And we used to do the investigations. So if there were any criminal offenses that were brought to our attention, then we investigated them.
Now, you were internal affairs also, right?
Yes.
So explain the difference between those two.
So internal affairs is more administrative. They deal with the administrative aspects of everything, and they have you look at general order violations, you look at CCP violations, things like that. In public integrity, you're actually looking at the penal code, Texas Penal Code, and looking at offenses there. As usually the order is, it goes, if it's criminal, then it goes from PIU down to IED. Sometimes it's reversed. Sometimes some things are brought to IED's attention and they feel it should rise to the level of something criminal, and they'll take it to PIU. They're supposed to work synonymously, and they'll have do their investigations, but at the same time, their investigations are not supposed to have the same impact. Like, they're not supposed to impact each other, rather.
Yeah, one's administrative, one's just strictly criminal.
Yes.
So you go from investigating criminal cases of child crimes to investigating potentially bad actor police officers or city workers of any kind. And how was that a big of an adjustment for you doing that? It is totally one end of the spectrum.
Yeah. So what's right is right and wrong is wrong. And sometimes investigations were necessary. Some people who did wrong, they got what they, what came of it. There were cases where there were some things that were not what was originally thought. And so, with those cases, we had to do what was right with those as well. The objective was not to put anyone in jail. Nobody wants to put their colleague in handcuffs. Did I have to do it? Yes, I did. Was it something that I felt like I was betraying the badge by doing? No.
They were betraying the badge by doing what they were doing.
Yeah. So I didn't have a real conscience around that, if it was really something that I felt was a bad thing. But I'm always for the justice of it. And if someone didn't do anything, then I feel like there should be a justice that they receive as well. If they do something wrong, then they should go to jail. I mean, we're police officers. We're human. We make mistakes. Some mistakes are worse than others. But you should know better doing this job, what's criminal and what's not. And you shouldn't want to indulge in that. And that's just the bottom line. And so I think that's what made it easy for me to do the job. I used to joke around because people would always say, even when I was gone, PIU is here, PIU is here. I'm like, that was 3 years ago. That means you're doing something wrong.
Yeah. That's the title of this episode, PIU is here.
Right.
Yeah, you're gone.
And I've seen everything you've ever done wrong.
Yeah.
Right.
What are some of the myths versus facts when it comes to that unit? I mean, even from our old department, because there is a pucker factor when PIU is mentioned.
Yeah, I think the myth of that is that people really believe that you are you become like this all-seeing eye, and you have all these special investigative tools that the rest of the department doesn't have access to. Oh, it's so contrary to that. You don't. You really don't. You really have to work at what you do to get information, especially when you're talking about your peers. The thing for me was I had to hide in plain sight. And hiding in plain sight is one of those things where people will always kind of be a little skeptical, like, is she working or is she working?
Right.
So they never really knew what my objective was for being somewhere.
Well, one thing you got to consider, too, is like if you're following somebody or you're actually, as you put it, hiding in plain sight, you never know who knows you or they've heard of you, they've seen you around, and hell, even Danny and I were doing a surveillance school one time, and Danny was at North Park Mall.
I knew you were going to bring this up.
Yes. Danny's sitting there. He's like following me. Mm-hmm. And I did it just to F with him.
I was going through the school, and he was helping teach.
Yeah. So I come up, and the scenario was following a dirty cop, so I come up to him and go, hey, don't you work at Southeast? And he kind of literally had to come up with something on the fly.
Yeah.
Of, I was just here because that wasn't even part of the scenario. I just did it to mess with him, but also just throw a monkey wrench. I knew he could handle it too, but that's something you have to be aware of. And also you're dealing with somebody who already has a suspicious mind and understands investigations at some level themselves, and they might be more cautious than a non-police criminal.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's a lot harder when you're dealing with police. They know all the tools you have.
Yeah.
Because they have access to them too. They know the strategies you use because they've probably learned them. It's just so many things. You had to be creative. You had to be really innovative on when you're trying to investigate another officer, and especially in something like that where you're trying to follow someone, because it became very obvious. Even though you may not want it to be, sometimes it kind of is. And so, like you, my thing was that I'm not going to make a big deal about it. I'm not going to really make it look like I'm working. But if I have an investigation, I'm just going to do it, And so it became, for me, it kind of became, it was another challenge. It was another challenge for me. It was another thing to learn to get through, and to also make sure that I was doing it with the best of integrity and the best of intentions, and to make sure, because this can disrupt someone's life.
Yeah.
And the last thing that I wanted to do was disrupt someone's life and put them in a situation that I have to look them in the eye later on. And I want to know that when I deal with someone, especially one of my coworkers, that I'm doing it with the best of integrity and the best of intentions. And they understand that I'm just doing my job. That's it.
But one of the worst types of criminals is the police officer who betrays everything that they stand for, right? So
Yeah.
there's a lot of honor in that position.
Yeah.
But again, the pressure that comes with it, you know, that's something you seek more than you run from. So
Yeah, I mean, and there was also political pressure with some of the decisions that were made. Some of the decisions came from above the chief, you know, and so when you have the DA's office and you have other people involved in your investigations, it becomes very complicated, and you have to decide for yourself, okay, this is my investigation, this is what I'm doing. This is the evidence that I have. Should I present a case that I'm not comfortable with? And that became the issue. You know, presenting a case that I'm not quite sure I have everything that I feel comfortable with presenting. But when you have those political pressures, it's a very delicate situation in how you relay that to your superiors. Hey, I don't have enough. This is what I have. Legally, I do not have enough to do what you're wanting me to do. And so I have to be very cautious about that. Luckily, you know, our chain at the time was very, they would listen. They would consider all things, and we would talk to the DA's office, and if there was something that they felt was something that we needed to go ahead and move forward with, then we did. And I learned from being in child exploitation, you can't be attached to the outcome, because the outcome is not yours to decide. You present a fair case with the facts. You present everything that you have. If it goes to the grand jury, the jurors decide what happens with that. And it's just what happens with that, you know.
Well, that's theoretically the standard for any criminal case.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of times non-police, non-public integrity, you deal with it now in homicide.
Yeah.
You know somebody did it.
Mm-hmm.
You have a lot of circumstantial evidence that point directly to them, but you just know from, you know, just having a gut feeling or having a view of a certain portion of the evidence, all you could obtain at the time, you know they did it. You just, from a prosecutorial standpoint, getting it done and getting it past that threshold, is sometimes you just can't make it happen.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing I'm sure you encountered in public integrity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's not what you know, it's what you can prove.
Yeah, and that's the standard for any criminal investigation.
Right. Yeah.
you're obviously a competitor.
Yes.
Do you actually believe that that stuff is outside of your control, or is that something that just grinds it? Because personally, I'll say it all day long, but I'm like, no, I'm going to win this. Like, this is me versus them.
Yeah.
In everything in life, right?
Yeah.
But there's solace, and I can appreciate the mindset of it's really not in my control, but not in my world. Like, I want to control everything, and so letting go of the control of it and saying it is up to somebody else how it comes out, that's really difficult for me. Is that something that you struggle with, or is it just peace of mind?
Yeah, yes and no. So I went through this phase where, and there were only 2 cases I remember my entire time in child exploitation that I did not win. And those 2 cases, one of which was a grand jury decision, and that decision bothered me to no end. I went home that day, and I used to box, and I remember going to the boxing gym and boxing bare knuckle until my knuckles were bloody, because I was that frustrated, because I at that point felt like I had lost control. Like, I felt like I had lost control of winning my cases. I presented a great case, and I had a confession, I had everything, and it was the grand jury's decision. They chose not to prosecute for whatever reason, and my victim was re-victimized by the same individual once again.
Yeah, shocking.
Yeah, and she was pregnant at 14, pregnant again at 15 by the same individual. So with Yes, control is a thing that I have to be very cautious about for myself, for my own personal psyche. I'm going to throw this out there. This is the ultimate let go. So for my 35th birthday, I went to skydive. And I didn't think I was going to get to skydive because it stormed all day. And I sat there and I told the man, I said, no, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. We are going to make this happen. And so he was like, well, if it continues to lightning, we can't do this. And I'm just sitting here thinking, yeah, I really don't want to get struck by lightning while we do this. But, I want this to happen. I want to do this, right? So the most liberating feeling was to skydive through a rain cloud. You're in no control of anything, but yet you feel in control of everything. Like in that moment, I had no control of anything at all. I knew I didn't. I knew I had no control. I had no control if the parachute opened. I was in it. I was free falling, And I made up my mind in that moment. Control what you can control. The things you can't control, do whatever it takes to make it work for you. And so that's what I did for myself, and that was one of those realizations, the aha moment. I was, like I said, I was falling through a cloud. I felt the raindrops on me. I felt all of these different things. And I felt it was like this new lease on life. It was so invigorating. I had no idea if lightning was going to come strike my ass. I totally didn't, because I'm in the middle of this rain cloud and I forced these people to take me up here. And so, that to me in that moment right then and there at 35 years old, I had a moment where I realized where being in control all the time sometimes is not as important as being in control of yourself.
Yes.
If you can be in control of yourself, then that's the only thing you need to be able to control.
And that is having ultimate control in the end.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You're speaking Danny's language.
She has been the whole hour.
Oh, I know.
So
Oh, no.
Everything. Went all the way back to.
I've been watching you smile and shake your head. Yes.
Yeah.
And
we have a lot more in common than she probably knows. She probably doesn't know my background and stuff. But
Y'all literally.
We probably do.
Seriously.
It's really weird to sit here and watch you two just fall in love right in front of me.
Yeah.
I already did that years ago.
Yeah.
I told you she disappeared, and I was so sad. I'm like, where does this person disappear
Sorry,
to?
Emily, to break this news to you. So, you get out of public integrity and you go to where?
I went to internal affairs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which we've already talked about. You go from criminal side of investigating, then you go to it's more administration.
Yes.
And that can be something as far as an officer violating small policies, not marking out, et cetera, and then or use of force. How did you fit in to that unit when you're going from public integrity to IED?
I don't know if I did ever fit in.
Yeah.
Because like
Good.
I said,
I wanted to hear that.
Daddy's back in love. He was on the fence there.
For me, we all have messed up. We probably all have a general orders that is in effect today because of something that we did.
Or should be.
Yes, exactly. So there, because it was administrative, I took a lot of things into consideration because I looked at how long an officer had been on. I looked at life experience. I looked at training, all these different things that they had experienced in life. And one thing, when I used to bring someone in for an interview, I kind of like to know those things about that person before I started to go into what we're talking about. Probably was out of my scope and shouldn't have done it, but it was important to me to know, what was your mindset when you were doing whatever you were doing? Because before I sit here and I say, I'm going to hand you this discipline and you're going to get this slap on the wrist, or get terminated or whatever the case may be, I wanted to know in that moment, what did you see? What did you hear? What did you smell? I wanted to know all the sensory things about what was going on with an individual before whatever happened. And so some people would really get into the thick of it and say, and of course people you go to ID, you're already apprehensive, they're going to screw me over, that's kind of the mindset. And so I think because I had a relationship with a lot of the attorneys from PIU, when they would bring someone in, we would have a conversation and they would tell me their side, and I told them, hey, this is what I have. You all tell me what you have, and we'll meet in the middle. And so there were a lot of times where I would probably fight a little bit harder for people, probably more than somebody else would on the other end. And it was just because I understand being human. And I understand that we all make mistakes. And I understand that sometimes there are things that we think we see. There are things that we believe are happening because of our past experience or the lack thereof. And so all things considered is how I made my decisions when it came to how I looked at my cases in internal affairs. And it wasn't always favorable of what they wanted the decision to be. And I would fight as hard as I could, for an individual in something that I wholeheartedly believe was a mistake. Now, of course, there are some things that we need to learn from. And I would be very honest with people and say, hey, look, this is a lesson. This is a lesson. But take it as such. Take it as a lesson. Take it as a moment in time that you want to correct. But since we can't go backwards, we just know not to do it moving forward. And so a lot of people, I did that because so many people had this mindset around internal affairs, like I said, and they become disgruntled. And when they become disgruntled about it, we always talk about morale. Mm-hmm. No one can give you morale. I'm sorry. No one can affect your morale. Your morale is your choice. And I feel like a lot of people feel like the situations that they go through and the things that they have affects their morale. Well, you can choose to either be a happy individual going through those situations, or you can choose to, be upset with the place where you have to come every day and earn your living. To me, who wants to live like that? I wouldn't want to live. That's a miserable life. So.
Do you realize that you just basically said you do the same thing for internal investigations as you did for dead bodies? Like you wanted to know the history of all of it?
Yeah, I didn't. I didn't.
Yeah, I caught that too. No, I was thinking.
I thought I fell asleep, and I was like replaying earlier in my mind.
No, I was thinking the same thing. She literally, it's like looking at it from obviously you're looking at the forest as opposed to just a tree, right? Which is in front of you. All the other things that led that person up to that point of being in front of you, whether it was in the ME's office when you're early 20s or being an IAD as a supervisor. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things that peripherally can happen to somebody going on in personal life, or dealing with a supervisor that's not good, or just making a mistake, as you put it, based on something they're experiencing they've never experienced before, and you can do something. You can have a great response to it, an awful response, or somewhere in between, because there's no, not everything's black and white. You can't just look at it as such. Yes, people violate a policy or they screw up, but there's a lot more to it than just that is interesting.
I'm betting you're going to say the same thing here again in a minute when we get to where you're currently at, and every other stop. No, that's a great outlook too. I mean, to be able to separate what you're dealing with right here and look at that person as an entire person. Yeah. I think a lot of people get stuck in, this is my job, this is what I'm going to do, and I need to knock this out. Yeah. But you take the time to actually understand the why about people also.
I really like to experience people. Like I do. I like to experience people in the moment. I really like to experience people, which is kind of strange because when I'm away from people, I'm an introvert. And so, but I really, when I'm around people, I like to experience everything about an individual. I like to know what's going on with that person. And so, it's really important because I remember things about people for years. Like I may not see anybody for years and I'll remember a small detail about them, or I may remember they were going through something at a particular time. And to me, I think that's what makes humanity so important. If we continue to do that and care for each other in that sense. life has its challenges, and we need each other to get through those challenges. And I just believe that if, in fact, each individual learned to be genuine and authentic with each other, and experience each other in that moment, I think levels of depression, anxiety, all of those things will be cut. They'll still be there. They'll still exist because some individuals are predisposed to have those conditions. But I think that if we took the time to ask a genuine, how are you? And to give a genuine response of, I'm doing whatever that is for that individual, then I think we'll start to have more, authentic relationships with people. And it doesn't even have to be, someone that you even know. My favorite thing to do is go into a store and just speak to someone and ask how they're doing. I'll get an entire life story, or I'll get what's really going on with that person for that day. Because I'll stop. And I'll really have that conversation with that individual, no matter what's going on in my day. So, yeah, I like that. I do.
Have you read the book Lost Connections?
I have not.
Oh, okay.
She wrote it.
Should I?
Yeah. Add it to your list.
I'll add it to my list. Okay.
It's going to be on mine now.
Hey, what day do we actually meet for the Jessica Criddle fan club? Like,
Yeah,
I want
we're
to
going to start
join.
one up. Hey, ATO fans that have actually asked for her to be on, you're going to be extremely happy, and the ones that didn't ask, they're going to be even happier we had this happen.
Well, I'm flattered, and for everyone who asked me to be on, I really appreciate that.
Well, we're not done yet. So we're not wrapping.
That's not a way to wrap it up.
We're not wrapping shit up.
Don't get ahead of yourself.
So dealing with people and dealing with officers, sometimes you had to spank. I mean, everybody needs to slap on the hand and say, you screwed up. You have to have this punishment because you earned this punishment. Do you believe that as a supervisor and a leader, Kent and Jessica, your sergeants, your supervisors, do you believe you should take a role as far as basically mentoring and guiding after that? You got it. It's like with raising a kid. You have to discipline, but also you have to get them to learn what they did wrong.
Right.
Did you find yourself doing that at all when you were in ID?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was, everything should be a teaching moment, regardless of how heavy or minor the situation is. I think that it should be. You should look at it as a teaching moment as opposed to you actually getting in trouble, so to say. A lesson, a hardship is a lesson. It should be, no matter the magnitude of it. You have to condition yourself to understand how you want to come out of that. It's just like the whole thing about morale. Do you want to be disgruntled, or do you want to come out of this and be miserable? Or do you want to learn from this and build on it? Me personally, I would rather build on it. And I like to, when I do have those conversations with people, because don't get me wrong, discipline is necessary. It is extremely necessary.
Especially in this profession.
Yes, absolutely. It is necessary. But at the same time, you have to allow individuals to be human. And you have to let them know that, hey, yeah, this is happening. It'll pass. And you had better learn from it.
Did you see a lot of recidivism, like the same officer doing the same infractions and they coming back?
In internal affairs.
Yeah.
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 Not so much in public integrity.
Right.
Yeah.
What did you learn about yourself working in internal affairs?
I learned how I wanted to supervise people. That's really what I learned. I learned how I wanted to mentor, train people. I learned what I wanted people to get out of experiencing working for me. I learned what to tell people how they should do certain things or should not do certain things. I think overall it taught me about the type of leader I wanted to be. I think that's really what internal affairs and public integrity taught me, is really the type of leadership that I wanted to portray.
One thing that I've always heard about you is how genuine and just how kind and fairness, and Jessica Criddle, they're synonymous, right?
Oh,
That's yes. Okay. And from the different units that you've worked, investigating officers and city employees at a criminal level, and then also at administrative level, to still have that, maintain that reputation, that says a lot. It really does. And you know how this department is. It says a lot about you to still maintain that, the way people describe you. So you wrap it up in IED, and can you tell the listeners where you work now?
Now I'm in homicide.
Okay.
I went to internet crimes and
went back to...
Yeah, I went back there.
So you go back to internet crimes as a supervisor, and who...
That was on accident, though.
Did they ask you, or did you want to?
So I applied for the sex offender apprehension sergeant position.
Is that the SOAP team?
Yeah.
Okay.
For SOAP. And, of course, sex offender registration is up under that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I get there, and jokingly, I had put my name in the hat for ICAC also.
Jokingly?
Jokingly.
I can't see you making...
Let me rephrase that. So I put my name in the hat for SOAP and ICAC because both openings opened at the same time. But the interview for SOAP happened, and the interview for ICAC hadn't happened yet. And so I got the SOAP position, and so I took that position. And so my second day there, I think... I'm standing there and I'm talking to some of my old buddies who were in ICAC because it's all in one room now. And they were like, oh, yeah, you should have, we want you to be the sergeant here at ICAC too. And I was like, oh, well, I had my name in the hat. And I was like, I said, it didn't matter to me. I just, I really enjoyed crimes against children. So then at that moment, the lieutenant at the time walks out of the office and she says, you used to work here, right? I said, yes, ma'am. She says, oh, well, would you mind just kind of handling some of the ICAC stuff, for a while? Because, of course, it has the big grant, right? I said, sure. Of course, I have a problem saying no. So I said, sure. And then 2.5 years later, I still had it. So I still had
those
that.
Responsibility. Yeah.
So I was managing that grant, and then I had the sex offender apprehension, I had sex offender registration, and I had internet crime. So I had all of those at one time.
That's a lot. So it had expanded greatly since you had worked there, correct?
Yeah.
And Facet was gone. Okay. Who was the lieutenant?
At the time, it was Carrie Wise.
Okay.
Yeah.
So coming back to that unit as a supervisor, and that unit has evolved, and also just did the investigative techniques change much from whenever you were there? Like as far as like dealing with more, being up in legal, I see all the data that y'all would have to have. Y'all just terabytes of digital.
Yeah. With technology, of course, everything just it blew up to a level that I couldn't even imagine once I got back there. And you're looking at, like I said, so many gigabytes and terabytes of data, and you have the levels of individuals. When I was there, we were only getting a few thousand cases. I mean, when I left, I think the year that I left, we had pulled over 10,000 cases with just 3 detectives. And so, it was overwhelming. It was extremely overwhelming.
And depressing. I mean, really, and depressing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, every day dealing with the worst.
I
the
can't.
Volume is just crazy.
Well, what makes me want, the volume was always there more than,
sure.
But it just, people reporting more or becoming more aware because of
technology. Better tools coming along, like you said, the funding.
Yeah.
It was.
More awareness about it.
A lot more awareness. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children had a lot more. They put a lot more information out there. And so, yes, you had a lot more people reporting. You had a lot more people, unfortunately, getting into it also. And then when you start thinking about, okay, now people are making sex tapes and you got all this stuff out there. And so now you have just everyone is completely inundated with sex by way of the internet. And so you had so much of this stuff that was coming up and that we were starting to see. And it was so much more readily available, I think, than it was when I first started doing it. Of course, the internet came along when early 2000s.
Yeah, but then think about even the iPhones.
Yeah.
How much that opened up the internet for
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah, because so I think iPhones were like first generation.
2006
yeah.
was when they came out.
Yeah, so they were like working on like first
2007,
or second
sorry, yeah.
generation iPhone still when I was there. And nobody was really thinking about using an iPhone to trade porn or, it was more, okay, we're going to do this over the internet. One of those things, you had the chat rooms, you had the different forums and things like that. So that was more the way that they would trade everything that way back then. Oh, you can get it any kind of way now, and that's what's so incredibly hard to really get a grasp on, because you can get it in so many different ways now. It's just, in a few years, I don't even know how, even with the technology that we have, how they're going to be able to keep up with the magnitude of child pornography that is out there right now.
Well, that's depressing. I mean,
It is.
and also it's depressing from prosecuting these type of crimes. How difficult is that? Because I've seen the amount of evidence that's needed, and the massive amounts of evidence that you have to gather, and then present, and then get it over to the DA's office.
So with prosecuting those cases, it depends on the amount of data. It depends on if it's going to be a state case or if it's a case that has enough evidence to go federal. And so working with, especially on the Internet Crimes Against Children side, a lot of those cases wind up going federally with HSI or the FBI, just because those cases have so much data. And a lot of times, if they're trading across state lines and things like that, then you're able to get the federal charge. And so on that level, it's not so hard to prosecute those cases. A lot of times with the child exploitation cases, I did not have a hard time prosecuting those either, just simply because, like I said, you have your live victim there. You have someone that actually can get on the stand and testify to those. And in most cases, people would take a plea. Those guys, they have a lot of courage when they're dealing with the children, but when it comes to them having to actually get in front of adults and tell what they did, then they don't have so much courage.
Yeah.
Well, they also don't want all of the facts to come out, and
True.
because everything's you're gonna get a really good peek behind that curtain of who they are as a person once the trial starts up.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, getting back into that type of crime after you got out of, and you said it spurred you to go to counseling. Did you, when you got back into it and you had to be exposed to that, it's different from being a supervisor to being a detective digging into it, but you still had to command several detectives and cases. How did that affect you? You already had experience under your belt, and then life experience too as well, and then different experience through the department. Going back, did you have the same feelings when you kind of resurfaced when you left?
When I went back, I totally had my supervisor's hat on. So at that point, my only concern was the mental health of my detectives. And so my biggest concern was, okay, how much of y'all being exposed to this? How much do you want to be exposed to this? I knew quite a few people that were there who had been there for a couple of years. And so it was really important to me to understand where they were mentally and psychologically when I came back. And we would have conversations. I would bring them in my office and speak to them individually and ask them, hey, how are you doing? How are you doing with this content? How are you doing being exposed to this? And this may seem strange, but I encourage them to start to take steps to move on from that unit. And one of my guys actually did. He had been there for quite a few years. He was one of the best, one of the best in that industry. I don't know if y'all remember Eric Wiest.
Oh, yeah.
And so, now he's making like 3 times as much
He's
as me.
brilliant.
Yeah, he's really, really smart. And so he went on to move to, he's working at cyber crimes now, I believe. And so, that was always really important for me to know how they were doing, because I knew how I was when I was there. And so that the whole mental health aspect was extremely important for me.
No, it is, and you experienced it as a detective, and then and thank God you didn't. A year, right? In ICAC, and then that's when you promoted. So that is really important, and that is a unit now being a part of the new wellness unit that we are well aware of that unit and what they have to deal with, and I'm glad. Kudos to you as a supervisor for making that a priority for that unit and how you managed them and ran them.
Yeah,
because some people are so immersed in it, they may not see it or realize it themselves.
It was really important for me to also write into their SOP how important it was for them to have mental health time, because I wish it was afforded to me, and I don't think that it was not afforded to me. I think it was just a matter of people not really being aware how important mental health is, and being just kind of being in the mode of work. And it's like, it's work. You deal with work. And especially with this being policing, it was one of those things where it's just like, okay, it's policing. That's what we do. You get over it and you keep moving on. And so, but having worked there, having known what type of content I was exposed to, having known the psychological effects that it had on me, I was hyper aware of the people that worked for me, and really wanted to know, how are you doing? I need to know these things because I need to know if you need time off. I need to know if you need some time away from the job. I need to know if you need to transfer out. Don't just stay here just because it's days and weekends, because technically it's not. You're a detective. It's not just days and weekends. No. I know a lot of people think it's that way, and it's really not. These cases you take home, these are the worst kind of cases to take home, but you do. You have your families, you have your own children, you have all these different things that you're still trying to deal with in life, and you're doing this job, of all jobs. I used to talk to people in child abuse, and I say, I don't know how you do that job. You're dealing with dead children and all of that all the time. And this is why I'm in child exploitation, and so, but it was because I didn't understand, dealing with abused children in that aspect, physically abused children in that aspect. I thought I would be extremely angry, and you just really have to know yourself. I thought I would be angry at the parents for, beating this child with, a hammer or a hanger or, whatever, they beat the kid with. I had to think about that, and I, for some reason, was able to handle children being sexually abused. But I think it was not a matter of I handled it. It was a matter of, like I said, those children helped me get through that. Watching them deal with what they dealt with helped me get through that, and getting the justice for them. That was one of the greatest feelings, And so I really prided myself on winning those cases, because it was like, yeah, we did this, But then you start to think about the life that this child is going to have. At what point in life is this child going to reach their breaking point and finally realize the severity of what has happened to them? And, another reason why I had to go to therapy.
Well, you gain resiliency from them.
Yeah.
Yeah, you had to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they're in their own way, they inspired you.
Yeah,
right?
they did.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we talk about going to therapy quite a bit. Right? We try to, at least. Can you explain how it was for you? Like, a lot of people don't, if we've never gone before, there's that unfamiliar feeling of, if I go to a therapist, are they going to sit me down on the couch and ask me about my mom? And I think that's kind of valid at the same time. Like, not knowing what you're walking into will keep people from doing things. But I'm curious, what was your experience with the therapist, if you don't mind getting into that?
So, coming from the African American community is one of those things where it just kind of doesn't happen. You take it to church, you go talk to someone, talk to a friend, but you don't go see a therapist, whatever you do. And but I realized that no one had gone through what I was going through. So who was I going to talk to? I couldn't talk to anybody about what I was experiencing because they wouldn't understand. I could talk to a coworker, but they're going through the same thing. So I realized that there is no advantage in having a conversation with people who would not be able to give me tools to be able to understand how to get over this. So to me, in talking to a therapist, I was like, well, therapists talk to everyone. And a lot of those children were seeking therapy. And so I said, okay, well, if these children are seeking therapy to get over what they're hearing or what they're experiencing, I can talk to one to get over what I'm hearing about what they're experiencing. And so for me, I think it was so much easier to go talk to a therapist because, one, they were unbiased. They were a third party, someone who didn't know me, someone who I didn't believe would judge me just based off of what conversation I was having with them. And someone who didn't necessarily want to understand what I was going through, but wanted to give me the tools to be able to fix myself. It goes back to that control, you know. That's how I regained my control and control of myself, was just by doing that. That, to me, that's what was most important. Like I said, I can't control anyone else. I can't give anyone else the proper advice, I think, if I haven't gone through it myself. And so for me, I felt like that was important. That was really important for me to do that, for me to go and get this help for myself so that I understand what's going on with me. So that when someone else comes to me with this same type of, situation going on with them, then I could be that person that they could talk to if they weren't ready to go to therapy. And so, because I didn't have that person. So it was like, well, I don't have that person. So I guess I'll be that person.
Did you have to cycle through a few therapists to find the right one, or did you hit the first one? Okay.
Yeah. I went to one, and it was like I was giving her therapy. So I was...
Oh, boy.
No, this is
or
not
how
gonna
about,
work.
did you ever encounter those that were pretty good at listening, but you needed tools?
Yeah.
So is that,
finding a right fit is always so incredibly important.
For you individually.
For each individual. Yeah, for each individual. And I think, like I said, the one therapist where it was like I was giving her therapy, she was younger. She was younger than I was. So I had a little bit more life experience than she did. And so with having a conversation with her, it was just like, you haven't even experienced.
You handed her a tissue and patted her on the back
pretty
when you
much,
left?
It just kind of felt like that, and I was like, no, this is a waste of time and energy and money.
And you're also involved in what we're doing with the department with the wellness stuff. And
yes,
do you do the checkpoints?
Yes, I do.
And, it's huge to get the conversations out there. Someone who is as incredibly accomplished as you are in your career and personally, professionally, all of it, right? I mean, the people in the room with me today are all fairly accomplished at what they do. And for us to be able to have the conversation about going to a therapist and how that stuff works, I think that's a huge portion of what we need to change the culture within the police department. So thank you for sharing that with us. I mean, that's I hope that if they get nothing else out of this other than cool stories, that they'll understand that this is good for you. It's okay to go to a therapist, and we need more of it.
It absolutely is, especially post-COVID. I think that it's so important that people are more aware of their mental health. COVID sent this world into a shock. It was like someone took a taser to the world, and I think that it made everyone hyper aware of who they were, what was important to them. At least it should have. I like to hope it did. It made people understand not to take things for granted that we once did. And so I hope that their mental health is one of those things that they don't take for granted. I think we did because we all got into the hustle and bustle of life. You go to work every day. No one thought the option of working from home was one of those things that we would be looking at and we would be dealing with and would be an option for us in this country. But now it's like the majority thing. A lot of people get to work from home and they get to spend more time with their families and things like that. And so in our profession, of course, that's not really an option. But at the same time, I think that we still have to learn how to make time for those things that are really important for us. And so that really is important for police officers to understand, that with that, you have to have time away from this place. And even if majority of your time and majority of your friends are police officers, you should do non-police things when you're outside of this place.
Danny and I were just talking about this yesterday, about and being involved in wellness units and dealing with in wellness and meeting with doctors and specialists from the Metroplex. And Danny and I were talking about it is not the normal for the black community to seek counseling. Why do you believe that is? And why? I mean, you mentioned it, and why is that?
So, like I said, a lot of black communities are very religious communities, and it's always been important to have a faith-based everything. And so the level of vulnerability that it takes to go to therapy is sometimes frowned upon, especially with males. And I think just males in general, sometimes it's harder to be vulnerable. So especially, I think in the African American community, it is when so often we feel like we have to be a little bit more just a stronger, to deal with the different things that happens in society. I think that is why going to therapy is frowned upon, because it looks like a sense of vulnerability and weakness, as opposed to education and strength. And I think that if, in fact, and I think a lot more now in the African American community is becoming a lot more aware of how important their mental health is, being aware of dealing with your past, dealing with all those things that have had an effect on this individual or the community or the family. Having to be able to go and speak to someone about those things outside of your family who has gone through the same thing that you've gone through. They can't speak to what heals you because they're all hurting as well. And so I think that it's really important that in the African American community that they understand that it is important to go gain those tools from a trained professional, as opposed to speaking to someone who knows you and potentially can be biased to giving you answers that you actually need, as opposed to what you want to hear. I would rather have a therapist tell me what I need to hear as opposed to what I want to hear, because I can't grow if you're just being a yes man for me, And so I think that it's really important to find a therapist that is going to give you that kick in the pants and make you have an aha moment and make you get there on your own, as opposed to giving you all the answers, because that's not what therapy is about. It's not about giving you all of the answers. It's about giving you the tools to help you create the answers for yourself. And so I think that it is so important when someone is experiencing therapy that they find an individual that is able to give them that is able to, once again, challenge them to be able to figure things out on their own, because that's what builds your resiliency. And that's what builds your coping skills to get through whatever your next triumph is going to be.
Yeah, that's so interesting, and I'm glad you brought that up in the African American community, that it is kind of, not say taboo, but it is uncommon, because DeMarcus Black, he's in the wellness unit, and he grew up in Oak Cliff as well, and he grew up, he's slightly younger than me, and he has said that, but I was always curious of why that is a thing. I think it's gotten better, in this generation, but it as you put it, it is a thing.
Yeah, it's a thing, and like I said, it's a thing because I think it boils down to that vulnerability. It boils down to
trust.
Trust. Yeah. That's exactly what I was going to say. Building that trust. Sometimes it has a lot to do with cultural differences. to be able to go and sit in front of someone who doesn't look like you and have a conversation and not feel judged. That in itself is really hard, because someone may say, well, you never experienced what I experienced. You don't know anything about me. But yet we live blocks away from each other. You know exactly what the community was like.
Right.
Well,
and look at taking even another magnifying glass on top of what you just said is a police officer going to somebody that hasn't experienced what somebody hasn't experienced, hearing the cries of a infant victim that you experience. So that's why I think there is the stigma's gotten better when it comes to police and going to see counselors. The numbers will show that, but also it's also you have to get a level of trust and also buy-in from the person you're talking to. You had to do some counselor shopping because it's like going to any doctor. I mean, if you don't like the care you're receiving, if you're not getting anything out of it, you need to move on to someone that it's about you and helping yourself.
Right. Yeah, it is. It's more than just about the money spent. Yeah. It's more than just about the time
going
spent.
through the motion and checking off a box. It's about you have to do something that's going to help you. And if you're going to somebody that's not helping you, you need to find something different.
Absolutely, because you don't want it to be a waste of your time. It needs to be something that's going to be lucrative that can help you further along in life.
And you don't want to be so soured by the experience that you just ward off that, counseling.
Yeah, absolutely.
I find it interesting that we talk about how we used to think that going to a therapist was a weakness, but it probably takes more strength to admit that you have those problems.
Yeah.
And so I tell everybody right now, it's kind of my running joke that I'm like the vegan CrossFitter that goes to therapy, and I don't talk about being a vegan or CrossFit. Like I talk about therapy constantly right now, and I'm really pushing it heavy. But you mentioned the cultural thing. The hardest person I had to talk to about therapy was my parents, and letting them know that I did go visit a therapist, and they were like, well, what's going on? What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
And I was like, nothing.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong. I just don't want to get to where something's wrong.
Absolutely.
And so that was really weird for me. It was awkward to have that conversation with my father of all people. I mean, my number one idol in the world. So to tell him that I was doing that was kind of weird.
Yeah.
And he listens now, so he'll hear this, and I'll probably have him crying. But yeah, that was one of the toughest things, was admitting to my parents that I was going to therapy.
Yeah.
But I feel like it'd be easier not to tell them, and it'd be easier not to go to therapy. So to push yourself into the uncomfortable area is actually a sign of strength rather than a sign of weakness.
Right. No, absolutely it is. It takes a level of self-awareness. It's just like someone who's addicted to alcohol or drugs. That individual could very well overcome their addiction to alcohol and drugs when they choose to do so. When you go to your parents, or you go to therapy, you go to all of those different things, you have to make a decision that I am tired of feeling however I feel. And like you said, therapy before there's something quote unquote wrong is the best, because it prepares you for when something does go wrong or something goes astray, to be able to have the skills to deal with that. And I think that's a negative connotation that is always attached to therapy, is that there has to be something wrong. Of course, most people wait until they're there before they go.
It's a deeper hole to climb out of.
Right, a much deeper hole to climb out of. It's a lot easier when you go and you're still in preliminary stages of just dealing with life, to get those tools and be able to deal with and recognize and overcome those things when you go to therapy. It's just so much easier.
Jessica, I want to talk about the importance of getting your family involved when it comes to mental health and you dealing with your own mental health, because what you deal with and how you're behaving and what you're carrying, it affects your family directly. Absolutely. Probably more than anyone else.
Right.
Can you talk about that?
I think the importance of having your family support you in therapy is paramount. It is the most important thing. Reason being, most situations that we handle in life are handled based off of past experience, whether that's past trauma or past successes. So when your family participates in those things with you, it helps you to understand, the bond of family for one, but it also helps you better understand how to reevaluate the way that you handle situations. And it also helps your family understand how to handle situations. So whether it's trauma or whether it's a success or whether it's just something that just alters the way life is, having your family there as a support. And family does not always mean someone that's blood. So we can understand that family has a lot of different meanings. Whatever family means to you, it's really important to have those individuals to support you in that aspect, because it helps you to develop new ways and new concepts and new tools in handling how you go through life and how you reevaluate these situations. So something that you may respond to that was traumatic in your past, and so your current response is going to come from a place of anxiety and trauma, and it may not be the response that you should be giving in that situation.
And that can directly affect the people closest to you, because they don't have an understanding and they don't know what you go through. Because you and I have talked before that as first responders and seeing the type of things that we see, we to shield the people close to us that are not involved in this profession.
Right.
We do shield them and minimize what we see and do.
Yes, absolutely. And so sometimes our families don't understand the way we respond. They may not understand why we sit a certain direction in a restaurant, or, some people see it as paranoia. Some people see it as hypervigilance. It could be a little bit of both. For us, we see it as preparedness. So it's all about perspective on that. And so I think sometimes with therapy, it helps families and it helps our spouses and children to understand, okay, this is how I am. This job has changed me in this way. And so to help you understand, this is how I am, and this is my expectation of how I'm going to change and perform. Now, and for us, we see it sometimes as life or death. It can keep us alive. And so I think that message sometimes is hard to stress to families. But once they understand, sometimes our mindsets in therapy sometimes helps us explain what our mindset is. And we may not always be able to do that. Sometimes having the mediator there, the therapist or someone that we can talk to, helps us to better explain these things to our family and helps our families better understand us in our profession.
Well, it could save marriages and relationships.
Absolutely.
We see it all the time with relationships failing because there's no communication.
Right.
Or just it's a communication with a lens over it.
Yes.
Because in our mind, we're trying to protect. We're so used to protecting people.
Mm-hmm.
We put a lens over it, and we don't communicate it well. It's not received well.
Right.
And it can cause a relationship to deteriorate because you go home and you're processing still what you just experienced.
Mm-hmm.
Your loved one they don't understand. They don't know exactly what you went through,
Right.
and they think it affects them.
Yeah.
It can affect them directly. The kids, the spouse, the girlfriend, boyfriend, and we see it all the time in this profession that the family suffers more than anybody.
Yeah. A lot of times our families may think we have a wall of cynicism that's up and around us, and that's not necessarily the case. Like you said, it's our method of protection for them, and they may not necessarily understand that all the time. And so therapy is a great way to communicate how we're feeling, what we're feeling, and our reasons behind why we do what we do.
Well, we're not only getting tools for ourselves of compartmentalizing and coping with what we're dealing with, we're also giving tools to our loved ones.
Absolutely.
So they can better understand and also process and cope with our reaction.
Yeah. And those that can, like you said, can save marriages, because then something that may have started an argument previously, now there's room for grace. There's room for understanding. There's room for just taking that moment of silence sometimes, instead of probing and pressing and let's have the conversation right now. Maybe we should revisit this conversation later. That sometimes is a better option. because when you're tired, you're coming home, you're in the moment, like you said, you just experienced something that, still has you pretty heightened, your senses pretty heightened. You don't want to have a conversation in that moment because you may say something irrational, and it's very hard to take irrational things back.
Yeah, you can't. There's a lot of words, even a lot of looks that you cannot
Yes.
take back, and that can start you down a road of a downfall of a relationship.
Absolutely.
And you could better, I'm not gonna say you'll save everything,
Right.
but you sure can put yourself and put your significant other in a position to avoid that and actually
Yes.
process everything better.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It'll save relationships and help relationships grow. And that's the whole reason for it. That's why I'm a firm believer in therapy.
You have always been in high pressure situations, going back to competition, dance, and then you're dealing with death and graphic images, working in the Emmy's office, and then just through the natural career of starting in Southwest. There's a lot of violence out in Southwest that you're exposed to at a young age. And then you go to some of the worst crimes. And then now you're one of the commanders, sergeants at the Dallas Homicide Unit.
Yes.
And Dallas Homicide has very rich history of excellence. I mean, going back to the Captain Fritz days, Detective Isom, she's up there, and the listener has heard her story. And y'all have an amazing group. And can you talk about joining that unit as a supervisor, how starting at the Emmy's office, wanting to know a path of how a person ended up there, now you're in a unit that has to put those puzzle pieces together.
Yeah. So, in a sense, life has come full circle. And Andrea, she works for me. She's an amazing detective. I sometimes get onto her because she's such a hard worker. And she doesn't relax. And so I have to tell her, you need to take a moment. So she's getting better. But I think now with being there in homicide, everyone always asks, how are you there? How does that work with your family? Like that's a demand. Like how do you do that? Why do you want to do that? And it's more than a job to me, we spend a lot of hours together. We do. We spend a lot of hours together. So it's like my second family. And when you do, and Daniel, y'all spend a lot of hours together in SWAT.
Lots of meals, lots of hours together,
Yeah.
more than you do with your own family.
Absolutely. And so when you have that, it starts to develop relationships that are like, your brothers, your sisters. And that helps you get through everything that you're seeing. We see the worst of the worst. We see people at their worst moments in life. We deal with families at their worst moment in their lives as well. We're giving information to families in moments where they could never fathom was going to happen, things that they never thought would occur. And when you're in those moments, you have to know you. So you have to be able to communicate with that person on a human yet professional level. And someone said to me one day on a scene, well, why aren't you upset about this? And I had to explain to them, well, if I'm emotional with you, then I can't do my job. I can be emotionally professional with you, but I still have a job to do. And so I think it's just, being there, being in homicide, it's one of those jobs where it takes a very special individual to do that job. Those detectives work endless hours to do that job. They're there on their off days. They're there on their weekends. They're there, when we had the ice storm. They're in the office. Sometimes we sleep there. There's a recliner in our file room. Go catch a nap there. Those are what the things that we deal with, on a regular basis. just because these detectives work so hard to get resolution and get justice and solve these cases, there is not a detective in that office that I know of that is happy when they don't have a case that's solved. Now, can they dwell there? Absolutely not. They can't, because the next one is coming in. But they're not happy that they have open cases. And unfortunately, sometimes that's just how life is. We can't solve everything until, we have the help of the general public. And that's what's really important, is having that relationship with the general public to be able to solve these cases. Because a lot of times people think that we can just do our job. Yeah, we can do our job, but we need the general public to be able to do our job. And that's what makes the difference, because they're the ones who know these individuals intimately. They know what they were into. They know what they're doing. They know everything about the moments that led up to their death. And so these detectives have to get out there, and they're the boots on the ground. And they go out there and they make sure that they get the information that they need, and they talk to the individuals that they need to talk to, even when they don't want to talk to them. And that's what's really important. And so for me, being the supervisor there and doing that job, I have a lot of different hats that I have to switch on and off, and dealing with the families is really hard sometimes because they don't understand.
It's a lot of grief.
Yeah, it's a lot of grief, and a lot of times it's directed at us, and it's displaced, and we understand that. And so because it is displaced, you have to tread lightly but yet professionally around that, and just let people know that, hey, we're doing our job, we're doing the best that we can to solve the case. Sometimes we solve the cases and the families still aren't happy. And I get it. And it's because, like you said, they're at a level of grief that we're not experiencing at that moment for ourselves. And so they don't think that we understand, but we do. We really do.
Well, because you're a human being,
Right.
and we've all experienced loss of some kind. Mm-hmm. So you talk about the family being upset with you even when you solve it. And once you solve it and you get to tab 7 and you get a warrant and a PC affidavit, and you get a person arrested, and then you have to build it for prosecution.
Right.
And then a lot of times that does not work out like the family would like or how you would like. Mm-hmm. And you have to deal with that hour of the family. We had Richard Cherylman here just last week. And I know you know him very well.
Yes.
He spoke highly of you.
I speak highly of him.
Yeah, he's an incredible guy. But he talked about his outlook of just seeing that he was exposed to so much violence. And he was out with y'all on these scenes.
Yeah.
And you've already had so much exposure to violence and just graphic crimes. Going to this unit, how have you changed at all?
I say yeah.
Okay.
And
Also,
and I'm always changing though. So I've changed just because, one, it's a different work group. It's a new work group, and they move differently. And so the way that I've changed, I've had to learn to be somewhat a buffer for them and the families sometimes. Because sometimes the family is so upset and so angry, about what has happened to their loved one, that I have to come in sometimes and say the same exact thing that the detective said. But because it's coming from their sergeant, then it's different, And I have to get them to understand, no, they told you the same thing. I just said it to you as the supervisor. And so that's one of the things that I think is probably the hardest, is dealing with the families. But as far as me changing, I never would take off from work. Like I never took a day off from work. And I think since I've been there, I take time now. I take time off just for myself. Some days I may do absolutely nothing, but I'll take the time off just because it's really important for me now to experience life as it's happening in the moment for myself. And like I said at the beginning, death puts life into perspective, and has definitely put my life into perspective for me. And so that in itself, how it has changed me. Now I don't feel like I'm giving so much to the job as I was before. I know, especially when I was a detective myself, spending endless hours. My son was so used to being, dropped off at a grandparent's house or something like that, or he wasn't used to me being home a lot when I was a detective. And so now my children are like, why are you here? Like, what are you doing home? Or, but they also know when I'm on call that I'm likely going to be gone. It's days where they wake up and I'm not there. They go to bed, I'm not there, but now that my older son is he's a teenager, and my youngest son, he's 5, and in his own little way, if he sees me getting up and getting dressed, he's like, hey, did
Call
somebody
out.
yeah
He knows call out.
yeah, he knows call out. He's like, did somebody kill somebody?
Oh, wow.
That's his
Yeah.
question. Did somebody kill somebody? And so in his own little 5-year-old way, he has to wrap his mind around that, but he knows, hey, mom will be back home. She'll be back to make sure she gets me from school, or get me to school, or get me to my taekwondo classes. And so it's just all these different things that I try to make sure that I'm very present for now, that I don't think I was really aware of before. And so I think life has made, or the job has made me a lot more aware of who I am, who I want to be, and how I want my family to see me and remember me when I die eventually.
So talking about family, it's not easy being in a relationship with a police officer or being related to one.
Yeah.
And you've gone down the path of some of the worst positions on the department to be at, especially with the callback load. Is there anybody you want to shout out real quick while you got the chance?
Of course, I'm always going to shout out my family. My husband and my 2 sons. They are, and my, my mom, my grandmother, my mother-in-law. All of those people are like my really big support system.
And they're here.
My sister, they're here.
That's great.
Yeah, they're all here. I have a really small family, but there's never a time that I can't call someone and say, "Hey, I'm on my way to work." And they support me immensely, always have. And so it's always been really, really, I try not to take that for granted now. Before I used to just, like I said, drop my son off and just go into work. But now it's just like, wait a minute, how are you doing? Do you need something? Before I drop him off, do you need something? And so I think that has put so much more in perspective. They're older now, and so I don't take for granted that they're willing to watch my kids now that they are older. My mom helps me out a lot. She picks up my little one, and she treats him as if he's her own. And so all of those things, my support system is like, I don't think I could have a better support system. And my friends, I have a really good friend base, and all of my friends, same thing. I can call them up at any time and tell them, hey, this is what I need, and they'll come up to my job if I need them to. They'll Uber Eats me some food if I need them to. And so like, I have really great people around me that are in this thing with me, and I kind of laugh sometimes because when I'm off work and I'm with them, and they're like, so what's going on at work? And I'm like, I really don't want to talk about work. Right. Like, I don't want to talk about work.
I used to get my in-laws so upset because they'd ask me how work is. I was like, this is the last thing I want to talk about is how work is going. Like, let's talk about politics or religion, like anything other than work right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So, that's I think for me, my support system is probably a really, really great one.
So what's next for you? I mean, like promotion or...
Yes.
Okay. Talk about this.
All right.
So I do plan to promote, but I also plan to go back to medical school. And so I've also been offered...
Because everything on this piece of paper isn't enough. Let's add some more things here.
So I have a doctor that has offered me the opportunity to come and just kind of shadow him for a while. So I'll be spending my off days doing that. And so I just have to psych myself up to being a student again, because I don't know. I don't know if I have it in me to be a student again. I do, but right now I'm telling myself I don't.
Have you really ever stopped learning though? Because it seems like you've done
No,
several different jobs on the department, and
I haven't.
yeah, you're constantly learning.
I haven't. And you know what? And that's the hard part for me, because I'm thinking to myself, I still have so much more to learn. It's still so much more that I want to learn. You know, there's so much more that I want to do. And so it's just like, where do I fit all of that? Like, how do I put that into little boxes to be able to allow time and mental space for myself and for my family? And so, do I want to promote? Yes. I missed the last lieutenant's exam. That was totally my fault. And I hate that I did, but I did. And there's a reason that I did. Whatever that reason is, it doesn't matter, because I am where I am. And I'm very appreciative to be in a spot that I'm happy where I am. And so the timing just wasn't ready. It just wasn't the right time. And so I never get upset about where I am in life, because everything is a lesson and everything is an accomplishment if you allow it to be. And so that is my plan, to promote. And if I don't, I'm okay with that also. I do want to go back to medical school, and I do want to pursue medicine. What I want to do in that field, I'm not exactly sure. But what I've really been thinking about is dealing with children who have congenital defects. And so that's kind of what I think I want to do, is deal with children who are born with severe birth defects, and try to help their families get through that. So yeah, that's in my next phase of life. That's maybe not, you know.
I can't think of a better person to have that as a goal and to succeed in that.
I really hope I can.
You will. Jessica, I have a couple of questions to finish, just to wrap this up.
Okay.
Firstly, when's the last time you danced your ass off?
Well, let's see. So I like to salsa dance.
Okay.
And I think the last time there was a concert that they had in the park. You know, they used to have those concerts in the park. And there was a band on the stage. And I remember going to the stage and dancing on the stage until I was drenched. And I think I danced all night with that band on stage. And that was probably the last time, or maybe not. Yeah, I think that was, I think I remember that being the
How
last
long
time.
ago was that?
Oh, that's been some years.
Okay.
That's been a lot of years. Oh,
A lot of years.
About 10 years, yeah.
Need to revisit that stage and the salsa dancing.
I would love to. It's, you know, it's not a lot of places that have, you know, live bands anymore. And now that I'm older, it's a lot of places I don't even want to go.
Yeah.
You know, unfortunately, going into, I was never a big clubber, but going into that setting, I used to love. I know the Monica's used to be in Deep Ellum, and they would have the Friday nights with the band, the salsa bands there, and just going there and just dancing the night away, you know. But can't do that anymore, you know. Unfortunately, the world we live in doesn't necessarily. I mean, you could do it if you wanted to, but I'm just apprehensive about doing that. So, but I would love to. Yes.
You mentioned in your bio that you talked about your family, having a tight family, but there's two family members that you did not mention.
Who's that?
The fish. Are they still alive?
By the grace of God, yes.
Okay. You said that the fish may not be alive by the time I read this bio.
We started off with 5 fish.
Okay.
So my children wanted a pet. And so they want a dog. And I said, well, a dog comes with a lot of
I
responsibility.
think a pet means you can pet it, right?
Yeah.
Can you pet a fish?
You can, but it may
You
run
can lie
away.
to the kids.
Yeah.
Milk anything with nipples.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can. So I told him, I said, okay, we'll start off with fish, with the fish, and how you take care of the fish will determine whether or not you get a dog. We're not doing very well.
All right.
So we probably won't get a dog anytime soon.
Oh.
That's a pretty stacked deck, though. Like, we know fish, especially, like, if you don't want fish to live, you know which fish to buy. My dad pulled that same trick once.
This is true. I did not do that, though. I actually got fish that I thought were decent little fish. Of course, I don't know anything about aquariums either, so maybe I did. Maybe, as my son said, "Mom, you bought carnival fish." I'm like, "What is a carnival fish?" He said, "You know the fish you get at the carnival, you win as a prize, and by the time you get home, they're dead."
In the plastic bag, yeah.
In the plastic bag. Yeah, he told me I did that one day. So we went and got new fish because I didn't know there was a hierarchy. And so I went and got some more fish, right? And so now these fish, but my youngest son, I have to ask him, "Did you feed your fish today?" And he's like, "Oh, yeah. Those. Yeah, those. You need to go feed them." So yes, they're still alive.
Still
2 of
kicking.
the 5 are still
right.
kicking. Yeah.
Shout out to the fish.
Shout out
I
to
know.
the 2 fish. I
Yeah.
was like, I've been wanting since I read your bio. I'll go, okay, I'm going to ask about these
But
fish.
now, by the time this air, they may not be.
Yeah, we may have to do like an RIP 2 fish.
Yes, we may have to do an RIP at the
Well,
end.
you know what? I will on the episode description time it airs.
Uh-huh.
I'll get back with you before and
Yeah.
This episode dedicated to
Yes,
Yeah,
the fish.
that's right,
the 2 fish.
I'll even take a picture for you.
Please, yes.
Do they have names?
They don't. No,
Oh, they
they
don't?
don't.
One
Okay.
fish,
Yeah.
2 fish,
One
red
fish,
Yeah.
2
blue
fish. That's
Yeah.
right. One fish, 2 fish. That's what they are. Yeah.
Jessica, thank you so much for sitting with us.
It's been a pleasure.
Oh my gosh, I guarantee you, I've been wanting to get you on for. I've been talking to you. How many months have I been bugging you?
It's
A
been,
year?
Yeah,
No,
about
it's
a
been
year.
about a year.
Yeah, it's been about
Yeah.
a year actually.
And now
yeah.
finally we got you down.
Yeah.
We survived the lights going out in the building we were
did.
recorded in, and
Yeah.
we survived that. And I think the ATO listeners, especially the ones that have been calling for you to come on, and I've been getting texts as I'm sitting here from people asking how it's going.
Yeah.
I think they're going to be more than happy with the product and you as a person. And there's going to be a lot of things that were said about you they don't have a clue of, and they're going to be really surprised with.
Well, like I said, I really am humbled by that, and I'm really flattered that y'all have me here, and that people feel the way they feel about me. It's I don't take that for granted. It's one of those things where having someone that thinks highly of you is a very humbling thing. It should be. I think that for those individuals, I really appreciate those people. They are instrumental to my success in this department. No matter who they are, no matter what their rank is, just having that support, I think having people who believe in you, regardless of when you doubt yourself. I'm human. I have those moments I doubt myself. And just knowing that I have someone who's there who believes in me regardless is really important. And I hope when I leave this career that I have left a legacy that allows other individuals to be able to do the same thing and come along in the ranks and just be able to accomplish whatever it is that they want, and understand that somebody cares about them accomplishing everything that they've ever set out to do, whether it's at this department or outside of this department. And I hope that I've been that person for someone.
Perfect way to wrap it up. Thank you so much for your service. Thank you for your friendship, and it's my honor to have you here behind this mic finally.
Thank you.
ATO listeners, if you're not a fan of Jessica Criddle, you will be after hearing this. Thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone.
Hey brother, hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far the sun and the moon, I'll never give up on you. Down when you're lonely, I'll pull you up. Life leaves you heavy when the going gets tough. I'll be your shoulder, together we'll run. Up from the bottom, yeah, we'll rise above. Hey brother, hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far, for the gold and the blue, I'll never give up.